is we're going to zoom out and get ready to zoom in. To Indiana, heading over to Eugene, Oregon to take on the number 2 Ducks. As this one is a top 5 matchup here at Your Sports Outpost, and I have somewhat been waiting for this one. I was kind of going into the season leaning Illinois, and then obviously Indiana did their thing there in Bloomington to the Fighting Illini and really proved themselves and being a very good Big Ten team in big moments. This one's going to be massive. Going into this game, we have 2 great head coaches. Indiana undefeated, Oregon undefeated. We have number 5 versus number 2 here at Your Sports Outpost. Oregon is now favored by, I believe, 7.5 points. That might has risen since the beginning of the week to -7 for the Ducks. The last time these two met was back in 2004, where the Hoosiers won 30-24 in Autzen Stadium. And if I'm not mistaken, Oregon was actually ranked as well going into that matchup. There's only been 3 meetings between the two, so before that 2001 game, they hadn't played since the 60s, which is kind of crazy, where they had a home-and-home series in 63 and 64. Where Oregon won both of those games, actually. So pretty interesting in terms of the little history they have between the two. Kirk Cignetti comes off of a win in Iowa City against the Hawkeyes, 20-15 there on the road to get another Big Ten win in the conference. That's going to be massive. Going to be massive towards the end of the season, especially if Indiana wants to play for a Big Ten title. They had the slaughter that I already mentioned. In Bloomington against Illinois, 63-10. We'll see if that continues to be a trend. I don't think it's going to happen against Oregon, but against other good Big Ten teams, maybe. And then we have to mention the game in Week 1 against Old Dominion. We'll bring up why when we go through this one. But 27-14 win there at home. Indiana was actually down, I believe, 14-0. Or 14-7 at one point against the Monarchs to open off the 2025 season there. Dan Lanning comes off of a bye. Obviously, the week before that, it was a big game in Week 5 against Penn State at Happy Valley for a whiteout game where the Ducks won 30-24 in double overtime. Other notable wins for Oregon, 34-14 win on the road against Northwestern to get their first Big Ten win of the season. And again, both of these teams are 2-0 in conference play so far. They beat Oregon State 41-7 there in the Civil War, and then 69-3 against Oklahoma State. But the big question, kind of keeping it simple here. We're not really jumping into crazy stats. It's more like records. As the question is Indiana ready to take that next step to be a top tier Big Ten program? Versus teams the last 5 years that have been ranked. Indiana is 4-13. One of those wins just coming recently again against Illinois. But you have to go all the way back to 2020, where they got the 3 other wins, actually. It's a little bit of a weird year, obviously. That's when they beat a top 10 team the last time, and that was Penn State. Overall, against the top 10, I'm pretty sure this should be correct. Indiana is 7-59-1. Yes, that is a big loss percentage there. Not in their favor. Their last top 5 win was back in 1988 against Ohio State, which they ended a Buckeye streak of 29 games. So it's been a very long time since Indiana has done anything close to what they could be doing this upcoming weekend. But this would also change the narrative of them being legitimate, obviously beating the defending Big Ten champions in Oregon. Obviously, also you have the massive blowout earlier this season at home. If they can get over this hump, will they be considered into that top tier? I would say yes. Long term, it depends on how long Cignetti will be there in Bloomington. So we'll see if this question will be answered this weekend. As you guys, both these defense are pretty legit. Oregon's defense so far this season are 5th in the country in total yards given up, 236.8 on average. 132 on the ground per game, 104.8 through the air. That is 2nd in the country. For Indiana, they are the number 6 team in 257.5 yards per game in total, 100.3 on the ground. That's 21st. And then passing 157.3 per game. So it's not too bad. That's still a top 10 pass defense there, even though the kind of 104, 157 number between the two, it's pretty interesting on how that's all kind of separated in the rankings. Indiana's defense will be coming up against a very good offense as well. Oregon so far on that side of the ball, 12th in the country with 236 yards when pounding the rock, and then 31st in the country through the air with 267.3 yards per game. I would say the interesting stat is the run defense versus Oregon's run offense. That's where that will come down to on that side of the ball. For Oregon and their offense, the Indiana offense will be coming up against Oregon's defense, as I gotta switch it up in my head there. Indiana on the ground, 5th in the country. That was kind of an eyebrows raiser there, as they have 260.3 yards per game rushing it. Again, that's 5th in the country, and they're giving about 243.3 yards through the air. So a decent combination. You're getting more than 500 yards per game. That's absolutely disgusting, but you got the same case over for Oregon. They're just doing it a little bit different. I would say there, again, the running attack of Indiana going up against that run defense, that might not work out so well for Oregon. I know it's only 132 yards per game, but they're going to have to bring their A game for sure there in the trenches. Some teams that they've come up against, as I was digging through, again, more of the stats. Indiana's game against Iowa. As we all know, the Hawkeyes are a very run-heavy team. They only give up 92 yards against, again, the Hawkeyes in Iowa City. A little bit of an eyebrow raiser there, 192 through the air. We'll see if that's a big difference. Illinois, in that game in Bloomington, they held the Fighting Illini to just 2 yards on the ground, and then 159 passing. So we already have some great run defensive stats against some good teams. One team I wanted to mention, that Old Dominion game. The Monarchs, I'm not saying they have an exact apples-to-apples spread option offense that Oregon does. But again, it's very similar in flavor. When the Hoosiers played Old Dominion, they gave up 96 yards through the air, 218 on the ground. So again, we kind of already brought up a little bit of things that might be big difference makers there in terms of what might happen here in Eugene on Saturday. For Oregon, when they play Penn State, they give up 276 through the air, 139 on the ground. Pretty solid defense going up against the Nittany Lions, and I know they're not in the top 25 anymore. Both here at your Sports Outpost or in the AP, Penn State is still a pretty decent team, to be quite honest with you. Oregon State game, 80 yards through the air, 67 on the ground. So some pretty good numbers putting out there. Versus Northwestern, I would say a lot of this was padded towards the end. 135 through the air, 178 on the ground, given up against the Wildcats. Then when they hosted Oklahoma State there in Autzen Stadium in that massive blowout, they only allowed 67 yards passing and 144 on the ground. Both teams are also tied in points allowed for third in the country. They're only averaging 12 points per game given up against their opponents. That's obviously going to change. I don't think this is going to be a nice and tight game. I didn't actually have a chance to check, or I probably should have put that in my notes of what's expected for total points. But I'm guessing it's probably going to be in and around like 45 to 49 points total, which is definitely going to be more than 12 on that average. Another thing to mention, still going back to the defenses, both programs are in the top 10 in turnover margins. Oregon is 8th with a plus 1.3 number there. Indiana is 3rd with a plus 1.5 digit. The Ducks have an average of 1.8 interceptions per game. That is 4th in the country. They also average 2 takeaways. That is 14th. And then so far this season, they have 5 interceptions with 1 fumble recovery. For Indiana, they're 18th in the country with 1.3 interceptions per game. They're 42nd in the nation with 1.5 takeaways per game. A total of 7 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, which was recovered. I thought it was also interesting. I went even into who actually got the interceptions. Mostly DBs, actually all DBs for Indiana. You got Lewis Moore, who transferred in from Ole Miss this past offseason. He got one against Iowa. Amari Farrell, he had one against the Hawkeyes and also one against Illinois. And then D'Angelo Pons, we'll talk about him in the injury section. He had one against Old Dominion. But for the Ducks, it's a little bit different. They have some DBs and linebackers. Jerry Mixon, who had a pick 6 against Oklahoma State and then 1 interception against Northwestern. And then Peyton Woodard had also a pick 6 against the Cowpokes when they visited Eugene. Bryce Bocher, one of the big linebackers there for the Ducks, had one against Northwestern. And then the nail in the coffin for that win in Happy Valley, Dylan Thangman, they transfer in from Purdue, had that in double overtime against the Nittany Lions. So yeah, if we're talking about all of these turnover margins, who's actually intercepting it, takeaways, well, that's because we're leading to what this game comes down to, and that's going to be mistakes from each team. Either quarterback only has 1 interception apiece, which is pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff. You got to go now into week 7 where you only have 1. That's not too bad. That is not too bad. Giveaways for the offenses, both are in the top 10 again. Not a lot of mistakes being made so far this season for either side. The Ducks are 5th in the country with 0.2 per game giveaways. And then Indiana is 8th with 0.5 per game. So whoever can get that turnover, score with some points there as well, whether it's a field goal or touchdown, it's going to be massive. And then also it's going to be very, very loud there for the Hoosiers when they're on offense. So we'll see even if penalties like false starts become a factor. Wasn't much of anything for when Oregon visited the Nittany Lions. I think they actually only registered 4 penalties in total on the road the last time they played, which is pretty impressive. We'll see if the Hoosiers have that kind of discipline, as this game will come down to the mistakes in turnovers, penalties, things like that. Injuries to talk about. We talked about D'Angelo Pons. the cornerback for the Hoosiers. He's questionable with an undisclosed injury. We'll see if the Hoosiers can deal with that lack of depth there in the secondary. And then running back Lee Beebe Jr., who's been out since before that Illinois game with a leg injury. He will also be out for this contest. For Oregon, one that I did not even know about, but I think it's kind of a good thing that the Ducks had that bye week. But Kenyon Shadiq, who we see here hurdling that Nittany Lion defender, he's questionable with an undisclosed injury. That is somewhat of a loss for the Ducks offense, especially if he's not even at 100%. But we'll see. As yeah, he definitely got knocked out of that game. I think it was around halftime, and then came in later when just before the Ducks went into overtime. Then some news that happened earlier this week, or it might have happened at the end of last week. Mekhi Hughes, the running back that transferred in from Tulane, he will be out because he's redshirting. So there's a little bit of loss of depth for Oregon there. But Duck fans already know about that. As our pick for this game, well, we're going Oregon. I know these two previews we're going with favorites, but it doesn't make a lot of sense of why you wouldn't go with either of them. We're going with the Ducks by an 8-point difference. We absolutely love both of these outside linebackers that we're seeing on the screen here. Mateo Uiagalelei and Tetium Tuioti. And I believe they will have another big impact for this game this weekend. Uiagalelei has 9 solo tackles, 5 tackles for loss. That's 81st in the country. 4 sacks from those tackles for loss. 2 quarterback hurries as well. Tuioti, number 44 there. He's 11 solo tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss. That's 59th in the country. And it has 2.5 sacks there, with 2 also quarterback hurries. Against Penn State, these two guys were stellar. Uiagalelei kind of had a similar performance they had last year against Ohio State there in Eugene. And it was kind of cool because I was over on X and I commented on his dad's one of his posts on the post game. And he agreed with me, as he did the previous season before. So I've gotten retweeted by Daddy Uiagalelei a couple of times now. But he had 4 solo tackles against the Nittany Lions, 2 tackles for loss. One of those tackles for loss being a sack. We'll see if he comes up big and getting Fernando Mendoza. And then Tuioti had 4 also solo tackles with 1 sack there on the road against Penn State. I know we're going with Oregon, but we still have to mention some stellar studs and why Indiana has been so good on defense. And it's reasons why. Well, obviously secondary, but these 2 guys as well. You have one guy there on the line, Keelan Wyatt, the transfer in from Maryland. He has been such a great pickup for Indiana. He has 7 tackles for loss. He had 1 last week against Iowa with a half sack there. Then he had 2 tackles for loss with another half sack against Illinois. Then Isaiah Jones, who we mentioned in that preview against the Fighting Alumni. He has 8 tackles for loss so far this season, which is some pretty good stuff. Some guys don't even register that many in, again, a whole year. He's already done it. He might end up with a ton of them and be just like Wyatt here in a lot of finalist rewards for that defensive side of the ball. Against Iowa last week, he had a 1.5 tackles for loss with a half sack against the Hawkeyes. Then 2 tackles for loss with 1 sack against Illinois. So these guys overwhelming that pocket. We'll see if they can get to Dante Moore. But let us know who you got in this game at Autzen Stadium in Eugene, Oregon. Obviously, we got the Ducks, but let us know if you got the Hoosiers or if you agree with us. It's going to be the biggest game this weekend.